Okay, my outstanding friends, as is my practice, being the home of the shocker du jour, Mudfossil University, I will show you the shocker du jour right up front, which there is nobody that can see this, that their life will not be changed. That's my statement right up front. If you see this and nothing in your life changes whatsoever, I'd like for you to tell me why you think it's inconsequential what I'm showing you, because it is as consequential as anything that you have ever seen or any human being has ever seen since there was human beings. It ain't bragging if it's true, and it's true. When I show you what I have to show you, and it is related to the Nag Hammadi texts, which are statements of Jesus in this Gospel of Thomas. This was written by Doubting Thomas, who was Jesus' scribe, and he wrote down his secret sayings, 114 of them. And several of them are exactly what I have found in my research, that the earth is a corpse, or the world is, whoever discovers the world discovers a corpse. And whoever discovers the world discovers the body. Now, what the body means and what the world means, is it the physical earth? Is that the world? And is it physically a corpse? I say yes, it is. Or it's covered by corpses. I can guarantee you that, because what I'm going to show you right now, like I say, if this doesn't change the way you view the world and the history, I can't imagine that. Let's see what I show you, and then you make your own decision. Okay, my outstanding friends, a strange thing happened. I was looking at the comments and so forth, and I noticed that there was a lot of them that went back a couple of years to this video I did called "What Did Jesus Claim Earth Was?" All of a sudden, they're just piling on to this particular video. Normally that doesn't happen. After a week or two, that's at the end of the comments and the case is closed. So somebody must have mentioned it somewhere, or somehow people want to know what the earth is made of. Well, you know what I've been claiming. The earth is made of creatures. The case is closed on that. If you can come out with any other determination, I'd like you to show me. But I'm going to show you something today that I've been holding on to for quite some time now, because it's way over the top of shocking. And I was concerned about revealing this, but in the Nag Hammadi text, Jesus said, just as I think that it was said in the Bible, there is nothing that's hidden that won't be revealed. There is nothing that's hidden that won't be revealed. I've been showing things that, the dragon, the giants, giant humans, everything that was written in the past appears to me is true. Now, what did Jesus say Earth was? Well, I'm going back to the Nag Hammadi text, and I know people get, oh, you can't read that, that's all Gnostic garbage, lies. Well, maybe, I don't know. All I can tell you is the things I read in here, in these Gnostic texts, which are the Nag Hammadi, just discovered in 1945. Same with the Dead Sea Scrolls. And both of these contradict what we were told about the history of the earth and all of that stuff. They really point back to mythology, basically. That there was giants, there was dragons, there was monsters, there was gods, there was battles in the heavens, there was all of the things that they had written about that were discarded. And there was a giant flood and everything drowned, and God took vengeance on the earth for all this corruption and so forth. All of that appears to be substantiated by the evidence that I have shown. Now all of a sudden they're really interested in this, so let's go back and discuss it, because this goes back a couple of years. Things change. I've discovered things daily, literally daily, that I didn't consider in the past. Now, do they change things? Not necessarily, but they're additional evidence to support the things that I was claiming. Most of the things I claimed, I still stand behind 100%. And I have additional information daily to support those original claims. Occasionally I find out something I wasn't really dead on, but there was a great flood. All the giants and so forth were killed. Prior to that, there was battles in the heavens. The gods fought against the titans and the giants and so forth, and Hercules and Zeus and all of that stuff, the muses. I believe all of that stuff has a foundation of truth. Whether it's all true and what spin you put on it, that's up to you. Let's examine it, because now, as I see, people take an interest in the reality of our past. And before we can understand anything, we have to go to the one guy who is Jesus Christ. He's the focal point of religious history, let's put it that way. There's all kinds of other characters in there. But at this point, to me, Christianity and Christ is the focal point of what we would call religion, which is what is our past like? What's the spirit like? Where do we go when we die? How come we are living and other things don't appear to have life in them? Like my pillows and my shirt and all that. There's no life in that, I don't think. At this point, I don't know. But I can tell you one thing. The things that Jesus said, I can support it. He said the earth was a corpse. Now here's where I'm going to blow your mind right out of your head. This is the one I've been holding on to. It's as you will see, it's unbelievable, but it is factually supportable by what you can see with your own eyes. And all the research I've done, and I got a ton of DNA kits coming, and we're going to do some DNA testing on all this stuff and see what this kind of stuff is. Is it human? Is it not human? Is it related to certain geographical areas in the world that arise where everybody else in that area has the same genetic profile? Like some of the giant creature body parts I have, they all came from the Connecticut, USA, Triassic era. So I would assume that they're going to be, from creatures that are right in this area. So would they be related to something that came out of the Middle East? I don't know. But I'm going to show you something right now that is one of the things that I was worried about showing, but I'm going to show it. Okay, my friends, this doesn't get much more serious than this. I wrote a paper on the draining of the Sahara and the eye of the Sahara, which is Atlantis, I'm almost certain. However, it is also literally an eye. My claims are that the earth is constructed of creatures just as Jesus Christ said. This is the optic nerve. This is the abrupt transition where the nerve fibers hit the optic nerve. Now I'm going to back out of here and you'll see where we are. Alright, this is going to be, all of this is optic nerve, and this is a special place in the optic nerve. You see all this stuff running down here from the optic nerve? Directly through this pathway into the eye of the Sahara. Now, like I say, I wrote my paper on this in 2015. And these are not my books. Paul Amatucci uses my papers and he writes the books. And I have nothing to do with the books. I don't do any work on them. But he shows some of my evidence, and he's got a lot of pictures about the mud fossils and so forth. And he does a nice job. Very, very, very inexpensive. And it's something to throw on a coffee table, start a little conversation about these things. And he's got a ton of them. He's got the Mudfossils, you know, and they're a lot of this stuff isn't even my words, to be perfectly honest with you, but they're based on my papers, dipole electron flood theory back from 2019, and all of these go back, some of them many years. Now, this is the eye of the Sahara, and that, my friends, was Atlantis. I can absolutely guarantee you of that, almost for certain. Now, this is the straits right out here. All right, you see this? Right out here is the straits of Atlantis. So if you had to come past Atlantis, you had to come through this little strait to get into the ocean before it drained all. That's the strait right there. You see? Now, I've looked at this pretty carefully, and I believe there's garrisons over here, right in this area, where they had some sort of a like a brigade of troops or something was stationed over in this area, but I don't know, that's just speculation. But they would have something, if this was the straits, and it certainly looks pretty straight to me, and that's what Plato said, it was the straits, and everything collapsed, and all this ran out over the top of Atlantis, and all that stuff ran out into the ocean and created the Cape Verde Islands. That's my claim. Now, did it happen when this giant fish right here was being attacked by the giant dragon? That's a fish. Take your time and look at that and be sure you understand, because I'm going to lead you to places that your mind had never even considered. And very few, well, nobody said. This fell on me, I'm telling you right now. I've told the story, and I'm not going to tell it again now, but this is a fish. Now, that's right on top of Atlantis. But look at the size of the fish compared to Atlantis. But Atlantis' eyeball here, and it's an eyeball of some creature. The eyeball of the fish, I believe, is right here. And it could be a flat fish, and this could be the other eyeball. They got one really snaky-looking eyeball and one normal-looking one. Now, all of the fin of this fish points to me that it's a flat fish. You see how all that feathery looking stuff comes down here? That's what they have. They have a very wide broth of fin, and it comes all the way down around this edge here, and a tail wraps around here and then comes back down here. Same thing, a lot of fin. All right, now, I said it was being attacked by a giant dragon. Well, there's the giant dragon. And this is written in the ancient text. This is Ares, who was a god, turned himself into, or herself, whatever it was, into a fish to escape Typhon, who was attacking, and there's Typhon the dragon. And he attacked right down here and hit Ares on the back with this venom. And I mean, when I talk about venom, you don't get any more venomy than this. That is some of the nastiest stuff that's ever been in history, I'm certain of that. And that is coming right out of this dragon's throat. And his beards. All right, take your time and look. This is his head. His nose comes up around here, all this down, and runs right down here. And this is his throat. Now look carefully at the scales. These are all dragon scales. All of that stuff is blood that's just body fluids running off. You see the throat? I'm going right down his throat. You see the scales? In between each one of these scales is basically hinged so that he can move his throat up, twist around and bite things. Now, otherwise it'd be straight like a tube that couldn't twist. These are the little cleaves in between so it can twist around. And that's where it's draining in between here, the bloody fluids, and they're collecting down here of the bloody fluids that are running off of this dragon's body. All the way down that throat, all the way down, all the way down, all the way down, until you hit here. And there his throat was cut. Again, written in the ancient texts. That is a gash, my friends, right across his throat. Cut his throat, and all of the blood drained out through this area right down through here. And at one time, this was as green could be. You looked at this, and that wasn't too long ago. That was only a couple of years ago. There is some green left, but boy, I'll tell you, not much. Last I saw, there was one little, there it is, that's the one patch. That whole thing used to be as green as, it was brilliant green. Not brilliant green anymore. Now this image was taken on 7 of 23, so, you know, July of 2023. There's some little green spots here and there, but this used to be brilliant green. And there's a dam there, and you can see over this side, they still got some green left. But there's no more flow of fluids through there. It used to be a flow of fluids, and it came out here, and it was pretty green, and then it was real black over in one area. This is where all the black blood flowed. And the red blood flowed this way. They oppose each other. And the red blood grew all this green foliage. And it's still here to some degree. I mean, this is pretty good. This isn't bad, but you should have seen it before. Boy, it'll knock your eyes out, green. But green grows on red blood. Red blood makes things grow green. Although I'm starting to think now that the green stuff is built into the red blood, because they found in red blood, they found an algae-like substance that they cannot identify. They have no clue about it. And it's in the blood. And as I showed one time about all the green mice looking balls, which is the tendon enthesis, every single one of them had that green on it, and there's almost no way in the world that could happen. How could that possibly happen? And they don't have roots, they don't eat anything, they eat the ball. So it's got to be something built into that red blood that has the moss already ready to go. That's the only thing I can think of. Now don't forget, that's his throat, runs all the way down. There's his head. Throat runs all the way down, cut right there. It's on the ancient maps. You want to see it? Of course you do. And his body runs all the way across North Africa. That's his body, that's his legs. Don't forget, he's attacking that fish. Here's where his anal gland is, and I can show you that. It's a cloaca. It's a avian cloaca, or reptilian, one or the other. And here's the tail way down here. You still got dragon scales way down here. You see it? And this is a bit of a swale, and all of the blood is running out of here because it sort of dips into there and runs down. And that, you know, this thing's 1,200 miles long. All right. You see this here over here? We got 1177 over here. We got 1101, 1001, whatever it is. There's a little bit of a swale that runs down into here, or there was a major blood vessel right in here that ruptured, or he was cut right here. Because he took a couple of hits. Whether that's just natural runoff, or whether, nah, that's natural runoff. Maybe. Hard to say. But his tail runs all the way over to here. Now, I have something else that's even more shocking than this. This is where his cloaca is. All right, and this literally is poop coming out of here. for some reason it piles up in these little piles. All right, I looked at this. That's not just skin. That's coming out of them in like little squirty piles. It's running down out of his guts. I've traced this whole thing back. I know how it works. And a lot of it comes right out of here. You see, this, they have a cloaca. Now, I'm pretty sure, but I'm not 100% positive. There's two things that sort of got me going here. There's this one over here, and there's this one over here, and there's this one over here. Now, I don't know, I don't do dragon, biology, to be perfectly honest with you. Was this a cut here? Was this supposed to be here? It looks like some got cut there. To me, that's what I would say. But again, I don't know. But that's not just your average hills and valleys. This stuff is biology. And it's dragon biology. Nobody understands it because nobody believes in dragons. But I'm going to tell you what, that's just not average hills and valleys. Absolutely not. And it's the strangest stuff. All right, so if you have never seen this before, this is a shocker. You can come up and look at it from here to here. Now, it attacked the fish with this toxin. And this toxin is so severe that it actually ate into the fish's back here. And we can see the blood vessels, veins, arteries, lymph nodes, everything. It ate right through the skin, through the scales. These are arteries, these are blood vessels, these are veins, capillaries. It's all right here. Lymph nodes, you can hardly see them they're so tiny, but they come right around these veins. That's where the veins accept the used blood. So let's come right down here. Right, the black is the veins. The red comes down with all the good stuff, and see all growing. There's nothing growing where there's no red. Red makes everything grow. Or is what's growing. Now, way down here, watch, where it makes connection to the veins. And the veins are porous. I always thought there were tubes that were not porous, but they are porous. The veins accept all of the last bits and pieces. Here's one of the main intersections, and here's another one of a vein and the lymph nodes. You see these lymph ducts. These are lymph ducts. Those aren't tire tracks in the desert. Those are the tiniest, 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 tiniest fibers. They accept the remaining fluid after everything else is crushed by the capillaries and sent into the veins. And they come up and they say, hey, you got any fluid here? You got any lymph? Yeah, I got a ton of it. And it takes it away and collects it where it's needed. And in this case, it was needed, the lymph, to go and try to stop the attack of these toxins. And the toxins, I said, are spit out of the throat of the dragon. Now take your time, hold on. Okay, my friends, this is just hysterical. I finally figured out how strange my mind is. Isaac Asimov, he wrote I, Robot, really intelligent guy. And he was able to sneak under the radar about all reality by making it into science fiction. Now, he's talking about mystics and going to somebody that gives you the answer you want, regardless if it's true or not. So he's saying, modern scientific research says 2 plus 2 is usually 4. And then he goes on to say, but you'd go to a guy that would say if it was 5, if you wanted it to be 5, you'd go to that guy and say, how much is it? He says, it's 5, absolutely, 100% 5. And say, yep, you're right, regardless of the truth. Now, I say to myself, how could you make somebody believe 2 plus 2 is 5, or 2 plus 2 is anything other than 4? And being a material science guy, I say 2 plus 2 what? You can't have 2. 2 is nothing. It's a number. It is a meaningless number until you associate it to something. So 2 boxes, 2 marbles, 2 people, 2 of what? Plus 2 of what equals what? I can make 2 plus 2 not equal 4. You say, oh, come on, Roger. Well, you take 2 hydrogens and you take 2 oxygens, and what do you end up with? Well, you just end up with the same thing, only it's 1 hydrogen peroxide. So 2 plus 2 equals 1. Okay, my friends, prepare yourself. As I said before, anybody that steps out of the realm of accepted science is basically destroyed. Now, how did Isaac Asimov manage to step outside and still be accepted? I'll tell you how he did it. He made it into fantasy. That's how he did it. And he wrote the things that were true in a fantastic way, and people jumped on it rather than having the academics destroy him instantly. They saw him as a science fiction writer. Okay, this is about 35 years ago. Now, in 1988 or so. By this time, Velikovsky, who was the hero of history, was destroyed, totally destroyed by academia. Now, I found it interesting that Asimov says, no, stay with the science, that's what the statement says. Let's see what it says in this interview. Again, haven't watched it. Let's watch. Okay, this is Fair Use Act, so I'm not trying to steal it, but I want you to see what Asimov has to say. And I have a bunch of other things we're going to look at that he was prolific. He wrote like crazy, and he was well awarded for his work because he stayed outside of confronting science, I think. Let's find out. And again, we're going to find out together.
Because humanity isn't rational, and somehow I don't think that I'm going to persuade many people to be rational. Now, for instance, right now, once again, they're talking about there being a wave of mysticism that's taking over the United States. More and more people are interested in astrology, in the new way, the new something, or new age, I guess they call it, and various assorted nonsenses of that sort. And I don't think there's a new recrudescence of that sort of thing. I think it's always there. I think that people have never stopped believing in anything that has no germ of sense to it.
Then why do you want to mislead us? If we are so totally irrational, and always have been, why do you want to teach with rationality, the rational solution of problems, as the basis of what you do right?
For 2 reasons. In the first place, I have to live with myself. I feel that since I do appreciate rationality, I do believe I have a kind of ability to be a skeptic, to insist on evidence, to want things to make sense. I have the duty to say so, just as some people feel that they have the call to spread God's word. I believe that if there's such a thing as God's word, it's rationality, and I have the call to spread it. And secondly, even though I don't think I'll convert the world to rationality, I may influence an occasional person here and there. And every small addition to the sum total of rationality is precious. And I would like to be responsible for as many drops as we can possibly add to that.
This is unbelievable. I could be him. I could see in his eyes. I could see in his temperament and with his tonality and his voice. He's frustrated about humanity. Humanity's not rational. Humanity doesn't care about reality. Humanity cares about being right. They just want to be right. Doesn't matter if it's true or not. This is stunning. This is going to be fun. A lot of fun.
A small pond.
Well, let's enlarge the pond. Tell me what the motivation would be for someone to embrace the rational ethic that you relate to.
Well, for one thing, you understand the universe better. To believe in nonsense is really to limit yourself terribly, to live in fear of all sorts of things that don't exist. Imagine, if you will, how it must have been in the old days when you believed in ogres and devils and all kinds of monsters and evil fairies. I mean, the whole world was filled with intelligences superior to your own that were malicious and evil, and you lived in terror. Now, heaven only knows that there are evils in the world and there are dangers, but you might as well concentrate on those that really exist and not create them for yourself and try to live surrounded by these imaginary menaces.
But even you say, heaven only knows. Even you resort to something that is quite that irrational.
Well, you know, that's the English language. I say I'm enthusiastic about thus or so. But if you look at the derivation of the word enthusiasm, it means God within a person. Since nobody believes that a human being, all on his own, can accomplish great things, when you get the enthusiastic person who does accomplish great things, it's because some God is acting upon him. Therefore, I use the word enthusiasm, even I don't believe that it's some God working in me.
Now, wait a minute. Let me go back.
Now, wait a minute. I'm interested. He said he doesn't believe it's a God working within him to create his enthusiasm to spread this information. Now, let's keep going. Let me go back to be sure I understand this. Well, here goes.
Enthusiastic person who does accomplish great things, it's because some God is acting upon him. Therefore, I use the word enthusiasm, even I don't believe that it's some God working in me.
Now, wait a minute. Let me go back over this, if I may. You want to serve mankind, and you believe that you can do that best by emphasizing the rational within us. But clearly,
the rational, that's the key. You have to be rational. Just because something you want to be true is not true, you can de-rationalize it by making it true. That's just not the way it works. You have to work with rational information and input. And this is going to be a very interesting interview. Okay, I'm going to try not to cut in. I'm just finding this so fascinating, what he's saying and how rationally he's saying it and how it's being looked at in a rational manner, what he's saying. This is by the time he's getting quite old, and he's at a point where he's made his statements in this fantasy mode, and now he's reinforcing it by saying, the way I'm taking it is he's saying, I've been talking about fantasy my whole life, but this may not be as fantasy as we thought. That's the way I'm looking at his approach to reality now. Is that the case? I don't know. I haven't looked into him enough to be sure of what he's talking about, and that's why we're doing this. So I'm going to try not to cut in. Here we go.
His own can accomplish great things. When you get the enthusiastic person who does accomplish great things, it's because some God is acting upon him. Therefore, I use the word enthusiasm, even I don't believe that it's some God working in me.
Now, wait a minute. Let me go back over this, if I may. You want to serve mankind, and you believe that you can do that best by emphasizing the rational within us. But clearly, the gods, the terrors, must have served us at least well enough for us to have maintained them all of these eons. Why do you want to take them away from us?
They served us because we knew so little about the world. We live in uncertainty. We know that at any time disaster might strike. We cannot foresee the future. It is very uncomfortable to live under such conditions. People make up ways of controlling the future. They dream about fairy godmothers who give them gifts. They go and ask questions of fortune tellers of all kinds to give them a hint as to what may be in store for them and how they may best persuade fate to deal kindly with them. Or if they're religious, they'll pray to God. Something like that. It gives them a feeling of security. Now, there's no use having false security if there's nothing else available. That's what people go for. But now, if, for instance, a person insists on some sort of mumbo-jumbo, instead of, let us say, taking advantage of modern medicine, then, he's virtually committing suicide. And I would hate to see people go to these faith healers and things like that.
Then how do you explain, to what do you attribute what you yourself describe as a renaissance, in a sense, of mysticism, if you will, of the non-rational, here at the end of more than a century of rationalism, of scientificism?
Well, for one thing, it's easier. To be irrational gives you certain answers. Anyone would rather go to somebody who'll say 2 plus 2 equals 5, and there's no mistake about it, than to go to someone who says, well, modern scientific research says that 2 plus 2 is usually 4, and we can't always be certain, of course.
Well, they'll say, well, it's because of magma or volcanoes. Everything I hear now. Oh man, I'll tell you, I'm thrilled with this. This is really, really rocking my world. I like you. Okay, my friends, I got a little. Okay, I do these in clips, and I go here and I go there and I do all kinds of different things, and I come back to these, so I may be out of order here, but who knows? Literally. Now, I am going to start from here again, but I just found this fascinating, and I am only up to this point where he's going about 2 plus 2 equals 5, and you can convince people of that. If that's the answer they want, they will accept it. Now listen to this.
Well, we can't always be certain, of course. They'll go for the certainty, even if it's wrong. It depends on what you promise. Why do people go out and buy fake oil stock of all kinds? Con men always get rich. They sell people all kinds of ridiculous things. They play all kinds of games which just take money away. Why? Because in each case they promise that the person will make a lot of money. And the eagerness to get...
This is unbelievable. That's academia. They don't care if they tell you the truth, as long as they promise you you're going to make a bunch of money. If you give us a bunch of money, we'll give you a piece of paper that'll allow you to make a bunch of money.
Get rich easy. The get rich quick schemes that people fall for, they're what they lose money over. Well, this is a kind of a get rich quick scheme of the mind. These are con men of the spirit, if you will. They're selling you something. A false security that sounds good, knowledge of the future that doesn't really exist, assurance that you'll be safe when you're not really safe, and you give them all the money you can in return for it. Same thing like betting which pea is under which shell.
You say same thing as the old con man's device, and yet obviously there must be some subjective satisfaction here, some subjective satisfaction given by the claim to irrationality, and some fear as to those who've mastered reason. After all, this is again the century of science. Perhaps as we look to see what science has done, what it has brought us, it would seem to us that greater safety, greater security, reasonably can be assumed to reside in the mystical.
Well, it sounds good when you say that, because you think of chemical pollution and nuclear weapons and all the things that modern science has brought through its misuse largely by politicians and businessmen and so on. But nobody really wants to abandon science, and it never happens. For instance, you want to go back to the good old days when you could just be mystical, when if you did happen to get appendicitis, you died in agony because there was nothing anyone could do for you. If you did have to go to the hospital, these were butcher shops of sheer torture because there's no anesthesia. There are a million things that people won't abandon. People complain all the time about modern life, about what has science done for us. Try to take away their automobiles and television sets. They won't give it up. So that while it's fashionable to say that it is better to do as the older generations did, no one really wants to do it. You show me a person who longs for the simple life, and I'll show you someone who's living in a penthouse in Manhattan.
All right, hold on. That is two separate issues. Let's think about this. I'm sorry to keep cutting in, but I am going to have to when I see something that I see as a topic of discussion. All right, let's go back to the way everything was, where we didn't have any idea about medicine and so forth. Everything was mystical. It was somebody put a curse on you and so forth. Well, if you can prove that by doing something special you stop that appendicitis, well, that is a material, substantive explanation for that problem. It's not a mystical. However, if you have something that you absolutely cannot explain, there's nobody in the world can explain it, like God, it cannot be explained, then you have to go to the mystical. And I have shown through my research and Velikovsky's research, and guys like him too, all of these ancient stories had roots that were deeply invested in reality, not just fake stuff. The giants, the dragons, all that stuff is true. The Great Flood, true. So we got two separate issues here. One, he's making it sound like all one thing, we're just all going to go back to Never Never Land. No. We go back to where the science dropped off, and it dropped off a couple of 100 years ago, where they just said, well, here's what we decided everything is, and we can't explain gravity, we can't explain light, we don't know what light does, and we don't know anything about anything. However, these are the things you will say if you want a piece of paper that says you're educated. That's what happened to science. All right, I just want to make sure you understand my position here. Is I'm not saying give up your cars and give up all this stuff and give up your TV sets and forget about the internet and all that. No, I'm saying use it wisely to understand what the reality of the past was substantively, materialistically, in the reality, and then add the ancient text. What did they say about it? Can we substantiate that stuff? And yes, we can in most cases now. Well, in a lot of cases. I won't say most cases, but certainly in many cases there were giants, there were dragons, there was a great flood. It created the Triassic era, 3 layers of sediments, the red bed, the gray clay, the black cap, with all of my body parts and all of these crazy creatures inside. And they know about it now. They call it the Edakara biota. And they say it was before any life on Earth existed, and then it was wiped out in one big flash. And they're right, it was, but it was big life, and it was gigantic life. Some of it was our size, some of it was gigantic. So here's the key. They can't accept that, so they wash everything off the table. And this is what he's talking about here. Now, if you want to go back to the way it used to be, to throw your cars in the woods and just start digging in the dirt for worms. No, I didn't say that. I've never said anything like, that we... It's so frustrating to try to show evidence and have the evidence and DNA and CAT scans, specimens, chemistry, anatomy, all that, and then have it thrown out the window because of people that say like 2 + 2 is 5, and that's all we're going to accept. And 5 means there was evolution, there were slimy creatures, and they all just slimed out and then turned into smart people or stupid people in the case of humanity. Homo ignoramus is what my hero Velikovsky used to call humans. Homo ignoramus. All right, Ken, I'm sorry. I keep cutting in, but this is important. This is cool.
Well, those people you were referring to before, those who are embracing a kind of mysticism, most of them don't live in penthouses in Manhattan. Most of them do feel that the modern world is too damn puzzling and that they want to return to simpler, though in a sense, as you suggest, more mystical elements.
Oh, well, now let's distinguish. There are people who live, shall we say, simple lives, who are not sophisticated, who are not extremely educated, who are clinging to the faiths of their fathers. That's one thing. They get a lot of satisfaction out of it. But there are also people of the Shirley MacLaine type who've got everything they want and who still fool around with mysticism. Not because they want a simple life, but simply because they want some kind of security that they can't find, some assurance that something they haven't got, they can get on the cheap. For instance, you believe you've lived in the past, that there's a transmigration of souls, that perhaps you won't really die, you'll have another life someday. I mean, there are a million things that constitute a denial that death exists.
But isn't science fiction itself such a function of imagination, such a function of futurism, that in its own way it does the same thing?
It depends. As in everything else, there is good and bad. There is good science fiction and there is bad science fiction. Good science fiction tries to invent a society which is different from our own, distinctly different, but which holds lessons for our own. In other words, you suppose that you've got a society in which space travel is common, let us say. What problems arise? What special difficulties do people who are engaged in space travel, what are they facing, etc., etc.? Now, this is no promise to you that life will be easy. As a matter of fact, I think that most science fiction stories tend to be on the grim side, that unfavorable futures make for better stories than favorable ones. And a friend of mine says that science fiction writers are scouts sent out by mankind to survey the future. And
yes. Again, I cut in, but yes, I agree with that 100%. They're the only ones that can talk about the future in a futuristic way and present it and have it embraced by society, but they sort of laugh at it. Like, they don't laugh at it, they just say, oh, doesn't he have an interesting mind? Da, 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 da. Well, they don't take it as a very good chance of reality. And I do. At this point, with the giants, the dragons, the flood, the history that we have missed, 100%, if we don't start investigating, all we do is say, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am. Whatever you say, you just tell us what to say. We just keep on saying it. Well, no, that doesn't work for me. And I don't know. Now I'm starting to wonder what his actual thought. I thought he was, well, let's keep seeing it, because I don't want to put words in his mouth, but all of a sudden I'm seeing a different side to him than I thought I would. Here we go.
And to come back and say, that way lie quicksands. This looks pretty good if we can get over a hill, and so on. We don't predict, not deliberately. Sometimes we hit on something that actually comes to pass. I've done that myself, but that's largely accidental. The main thing we do is just see if we can illuminate the human condition under a particular system of thinking that is supposed we lived in a society other than our own. Now, it's just another version of literature, in other words, good literature.
You know, again, I'm cutting in, I'm sorry, but when he's talking about this, I'm doing the same thing. I'm thinking to myself, I'm holding things like this in my hand, and I'm staring at it forever, and I'm thinking to myself, where did it come from? How did that thing get to become a meteorite? And also become actually a body part, and it is. It's a gigantic finger, and that's a meteorite, and it exploded coming through space from the wet blood that was in here. Exploded. This is a terrestrial fingertip. It didn't explode. Both of these are going to be getting DNA tested to see. This one was here on Earth. The blood just ran out of it. This one, the blood exploded. The vein sides don't come out. See the vein, 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 vein. They don't blow out. Artery, 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 artery. The arteries blow completely out. There's no difference between these two fingertips. I am saying, I bet you this is a human. And it came through space. So they were out there and it came into space. Are humans everywhere in the universe? I don't know. Do we have a common origin through the universe? Yes, maybe. I don't know. But I can tell you what, these two could be daddy and baby. They're going to be the same, only this was returning from space and went out to space to see if we could find a new place to live because Earth is doomed. This is just over the top.
Which are all of it, is supposed to illuminate the human condition.
But it's interesting that you say so much of science fiction is negative, in a sense, is grim. I think you used the word grim. I'm thinking, too, of the negative utopias. I think many of us used to think that books about the future, writings about the future, were always very positive. And then we came to Brave New World, which in its own way was written so many decades ago, a kind of science fiction, and a negative utopia. Brave New World, 1984, and a great number of them.
Well, this happens all the time for a simple reason, that it makes for better drama. You write a story about how everything is just fine, and people fall asleep over it. Even stories which have happy endings are grim until the happy ending. Think of all the fairy tales that you read. Sometimes people say, why don't children go back to those good old fairy tales? And I recite the plot of Hansel and Gretel. Here are this poor woodcutting family starving to death. And the mother, not the stepmother, the mother suggests they send out the two kids and just let them starve so they don't have to feed them. And they send them out twice. And then when they're finally lost because they put out breadcrumbs and the birds have eaten it, they come across a witch who's going to eat them. So you've got abandonment, you've got child abuse, you've got cannibalism. Finally it ends happily, but you can imagine what the kid has suffered till he gets there. Why do you put that in? These are folk tales. The grimmer you make them, the more relief there is at the happy ending. And unfortunately, people are going to realize that the grimness is true. The happy ending is false.
Do you follow that same pattern yourself in your science fiction?
In a way, I do. There's always danger. There's always risk. It always seems as though the right side, whoever they may be, is not going to win out. And in my stories, they always do. But,
well, I got to tell you something. Somehow we survived this flood. And if you could go back and relive what they had gone through during the Great Flood, it's just unbelievable that anybody could have possibly survived, first of all. And secondly, what a struggle that would have been. And my hero, Immanuel Velikovsky, wrote about Worlds in Collision, the original crash. And then he also wrote about Ages in Chaos. Just think of what would have happened after that. I try to put myself in the realm of these things. And these people knew that were alive, that survived, about these giants and dragons and monsters. And that story still came down. So they knew about it. Somebody knew about it. Those stories came down. They were not lost. And they appear to be quite true based on the material substance that I have presented and shown. And I have giant human being body parts here, absolutely no question. And they will be, they're being DNA tested as we speak. Well, I already had 3 of them DNA tested, and that was rejected. But now we're in a new phase of thinking, hopefully. I got a couple 100,000 people that are on my channel. They're not all active, but there's a lot of new understanding. It's not just belief, it's understanding. And I need to keep my channel in reality. So don't come up here and start talking about insane things that you have no support for. I'm not going to have that. Otherwise, I look insane myself. So If you come up here and you say, we found this, we found that, or here's a specimen, or here's the DNA. Right now, what I want to get presented and accepted is all of the things that I presented. They're reality. There's scientific specimens that cannot be ignored any longer. This is just a tragedy to humanity to have this go on for this many years, 15 years. Total denial of reality by the ones we trust. The ones we trust are the ones we shouldn't trust. I'm going to tell you that right now. It's just a fact. You know, that was a harsh statement. The way to trust someone is to search for validity, to ask them, so what do you think of this? Can we discuss this? And then show them the evidence and then see their reaction. Then you know who you can trust. If you can't trust them, you can't trust them. And you'll know one way or the other. But if you've done enough research with me, you know the things I've presented they can't be denied. And they stand head and shoulders above any other research that's been done about ancient creatures. And I have the specimens, I have the DNA tests, I have the CAT scans, I have the chemistry, I know how it all happened. Velikovsky did all the research on when it happened, how it happened. Venus almost hit Earth, then it hit Mars, and all of these things, there's body parts in space. I have all this. And if it's not examined and just rejected because I'm just too crazy, it's just too wild to be true, then you have somebody you can't trust because they won't look at evidence. That is a person who is a false teacher and as it says in the ancient texts, there will be false teachers among you, and their destruction does not sleep. It's exactly what it says. You know, when he was talking before about Brave New World, Aldous Huxley, and I read that, 1984, Brave New World. 1984 was when everything was supposed to change, and maybe about that time it did. But anyway, all right, these are the kind of guys that were heroes. Aldous Huxley talked about Brave New World and so forth. Him, Isaac Asimov. I like Sitchin too. He was a researcher. He did the Sumerians. Velikovsky did everybody. And he had every culture on the face of the planet basically he went to. And he did actually go to those places. Talk to the people in the cultural centers, the museums, the libraries, historic societies, monuments. He did everything. He looked at all the stuff, and he reported one big report called Worlds in Collision. Here's how it happened. It took 7 days for the fiery comet to almost hit Earth, burned and boiled the oceans, and created all this great flood. And recent research makes it understood that stopping the Earth, basically, during this impact, created the oceans to overwhelm the whole Earth and drew up all the siliceous ooze, silica, which created all the quartz, which solidified everything. And that's the only reason these things turned into mud fossils is because of the silicates. All this research has been done now, and it's denied because it completely overthrows academia. It puts them in a very, very bad light. And especially the bad light is that the fact that they would not allow it to be discussed for 15 years now. And I went to the top universities in the world. I started with Yale, the top guy at Yale, Derek Briggs. If you wanted to contact him, ask him why he wouldn't do his work. And then he took credit for my research by doing a paper called Exceptional Preservation of Soft-Bodied Creatures promoted by Silica-Rich Oceans. That was a couple of years after I gave him that exact same research. So these are the kind of people we're dealing with. And it's time to confront them, not just to hide out from them. You know, you could be scared of them and say, oh, well, I better not say anything. They're going to be mad, and who knows what they'll do to me. I don't really care anymore. I'm done caring about that stuff. I'm looking for eternity. I'm looking for the things that he's talking about. Oh, you want to believe in this? Well, yes, I do, because I have the evidence, not just because I want to believe in it. I'm starting to see Isaac Asimov on a little different plane than I thought I would. Let's see. Let's just keep going. Who knows? All right, here we go. So whatever happened to Edward
Bellamy's approach of looking backward, in which one could think of a very positive utopia?
Well, there you have something like Thomas More's utopia, which gave the whole thing its name. There you're trying to sell something. You're trying to sell the idea that everything would be wonderful if only you had a single tax on land, or everything would be wonderful if only you had socialism, or everything would be wonderful if simply everyone held their possessions in common, or if everyone went to church and followed the golden rule. So naturally, you're presenting a wonderful world, but much more common and much more effective are the ones that show what not to do, like in Gulliver's Travels, when you have the world of little people who mirror all the follies and corruption of 18th century England, and you laugh at it because these are little 6-inch people who are doing all this, you see? And you don't stop to think that what the author is doing is to deliberately mimic English society and get you to laugh at him because you think it's science fiction.
Do you have a...
There is, that's it. He just said the golden word. Don't make it reality even though it was. If you can make it science fiction, you're good to go.
political agenda, if I may call it that? Or to what extent do you have a political agenda? I think that may be a better question.
Well, let's put it this way. I'm firmly convinced that the problems we face, all the problems humanity faces now, are global in nature. In other words, if the ozone layer is disappearing, it's disappearing for everybody, not just for Americans or just for Egyptians. If we're dealing with overpopulation, the effect on the earth is universal. With pollution, there's only one ocean, one atmosphere. We're polluting it for all of us, whoever pollutes it. And there's no way in which we're ever going to solve these problems all by ourselves. No nation can do it by itself. The only way a sensible attack on these problems can be made is by international cooperation, a global effort.
The only way it can be made is to investigate the actual evidence that points to the causes of all of these things. Global warming is not just because, well, this is a whole other thing we'll get into, but global warming is because we're scrubbing through the universe on our atmosphere. The outside atmosphere is it's around 3,000 degrees. It's because those particles out there are scrubbing through all the other particles in space. It's not a vacuum. And the more we burn, the more gases expand, and the scrubber and scrubber and scrubber we get. And then it's hotter and hotter and hotter. And then that's why we get global warming. It's not, they don't even know what they're talking about until they will allow us to speak. These universities, they've taken over and denied reality strictly, in my opinion, is for funding, to make sure that they can just keep dragging this thing out. Oh, we just really don't understand. A couple $billion more, maybe we could figure something out. Another 10 years, probably 15, 20, who knows. And that's what's been going on for forever. It's a money vacuum, basically. Our institutions, our federal agencies, academia, all of them. That's my opinion, and I found it holds up very damn well. So see, he's saying it's a global, international effort. However, the top guys have just doling out the cash to anybody who wants their buddies, and that's what I'm seeing. There's no way in the world they can miss some of the things that I have shown and some of the things that I have presented that are substantive and material, and instead they just keep handing out the cash, just keep walking around in circles. We'll give you some more money next year, don't worry about it.
So I'm all for international cooperation. I'm against not only war, but I'm against the fact that the world spends $500 billion every year just preparing for wars which they don't dare fight. And that $500 billion that goes into weapons of war, into standing armies, into all kinds of chazarai, can't be used for anything else, and isn't. So that we're short on dough for things to combat acid rain, for instance. We can't figure out what to do about a host of problems because we're spending not only all our money, but all our effort and all our emotion on this useless thing of nation versus nation, which may destroy us all.
Now, when you go through that litany, it comes back again, I must say, to the notion of how in the world do you equate those threats, the things we are doing to ourselves, with this rationality that you assume to prevail in the nature of human nature.
What? Hold on, let me jump in on this one more time. I see no way, and I've racked my brain about what could help the world. And there is nothing, except if people realize these ancient stories were true, and there is a heaven and there is a hell, and if you do the things on that side of the sheet, you go into hell. And if you do the things on this side of the sheet, you got a good chance of getting to heaven and, you know, having an eternity that is enjoyable versus a disastrous eternity. And eternity lasts a pretty long time. You know, just figure out, look up eternity. It does not end. Now, the things that I have shown and presented as physical evidence support these ancient stories. And if people took these things truly for real and realized there's going to be consequences if you do the things they're doing, and bombing people and starving people and using chemical and all, absolute horrible, horrific world we live in right now. It's just beyond, I don't want to go there anymore because it's so depressing to see what's happened to the world that could be totally different. And just like you say, we spent trillions, half a trillion back then, that's a drop in a bucket now. And they can't find enough money to help the people after floods and disasters and hurricanes. But they sure as hell can make some more bombs. All right, let's just keep going here.
Well, what stands in the way of us attacking these things in a global sense? Mostly irrational feelings about I'm better than you are. Each nation suspects its neighbors. There's a kind of awareness of enormous differences that don't really exist. You know, what is the major difference between the Northern Irish who are Protestant and the Northern Ireland who are Catholic? Protestants and Catholics exist together in all the world. Why can't they exist together in Northern Ireland? What keeps them apart? Keeps them killing each other for decade after decade. What?
You know, I know people in Northern Ireland, I've heard that they still don't get along too well. Here we go.
What is there about the Israelis and the Palestinians that makes it impossible for them to see each other's point of view? There's a difference in religion, yes, but surely we're past the idea of wars of religion.
No, we're not. We're not past those ideas at all. And I have a feeling that there's people that know more than they're letting on to. Because these ancient things were true. And these religions were nations against nations, it appears to me. And I think they were different peoples, different constructed peoples, created peoples. I see different stature and architecture in people's bodies from different regions in the world. Did they all just, you know, like they talk about evolution, and they're all, the toughest guy in that region just had more wives and had more kids, and they all sort of looked like him as they grew from that particular nation? That's possible. Or were they all really made to fight each other by the gods? And they were gods. I don't care what anybody says anymore. You could talk blue in the face. If you won't look at my stuff and discuss it with me, go about your way. Because I have the evidence, and until it's looked at, whatever you say is absolutely meaningless.
Is this foolishness, which I can only think of as foolishness, that as the whole world is sliding into the abyss, people are ignoring that fact and fighting with each other. Who cares who's going to win when everyone's going to lose? So that we have irrationality keeping us from really attempting to tackle the problems.
You know, as I listen to you, and listen very carefully, I can't help but think of another novelist, another novel. Can't think of that segment in The Brothers of the Grand Inquisitor, and the accusation made to the Christ figure, that he demanded too much of us, worked on the assumption that we human beings were capable of eschewing miracles, eschewing the search for bread, etc. You want us to do something that it would seem this century has demonstrated we're not capable of doing.
We can do it if we really want to, because we have done it in the past and we are in the process of doing it. When the Revolutionary War was over and the United States had won its independence, there were 13 independent states in the nation. Congress was a United Nations at that time. It couldn't pass taxes, couldn't collect money except voluntary contributions, as the United Nations does. It couldn't establish laws. Each state established laws. The nation would certainly have fallen apart into quarreling segments and been destroyed, except that we had the Constitutional Convention in which the states gave up their sovereign power and formed a federal union which was to have the sovereign power. And it continued, and 80 years later, over the issue of slavery, some states were sorry they'd given up their sovereign power and tried to take it back.
Well, if we were to turn to the individuals who pointed the way to us out of that morass, to Jefferson and Madison and Hamilton and Washington and others, do you find their counterpart today? Do you find their counterpart in the scientific community, for instance?
Well, yes, I do. As a matter of fact, I can't point out the individuals properly. I'm sure you couldn't at that time. You know, distance lends enchantment and gives you perspective. But what do I see when I look at things? I see that Reagan and Gorbachev standing there with their arms around each other's shoulder, talking like buddies. And you stop to think of it. This is Gorbachev, to whom Reagan must be an imperialist dog. And to Reagan, Gorbachev must be an evil imperialist. And the question is, why are they such friends? And the answer is they have no choice. And I think all through the world today, you see cooperation because people have no choice. You see, right now there's going to be an economic summit. Every year the 7 industrial nations meet at an economic summit. What they accomplish, I don't know, but there's the feeling they have to get together and talk. We cooperate with questions of the oceans. We cooperate on weather. It's amazing how much the United States and the Soviet Union, how much information they pass each other on space for their own good. Nobody's doing this for the good of anyone else. They're doing this for their own good. And this is going to increase. People are going to realize increasingly that they're going to have to be nice to each other, not because the Bible says so, not because niceness is nice, but only because the other way there is death.
Is there any indication
Exactly, there is death if you don't do the obligations that they said to do in these ancient texts. I believe that's true. You're going to go to hell. Not one single culture on the entire planet didn't speak of gods and heaven and hell, or the equivalents, and dragons and monsters and giants and devious things and a great flood. There was nothing but the same story. The same story in every culture. Do we think they were all insane? Do we think they all got together and made up all these stories? When some of them never even met each other, they were on other sides of the world, and they had never even appeared to have any contact? Obviously not. Obviously not. So, if you don't do the things that these ancient texts read, as far as I'm concerned, there's a lot of validity to these things. And like he was saying, the golden rule, just do unto others as you would have them do unto you. If that happened, everybody would have a good eternity, and the world itself would be a magnificent place to live.
As far as you're concerned, that scientists, more than others, understand this?
Yes, we are all this. First place, there's only one science. Of all the cultural aspects of humanity, the only one which is not broken up into national or regional splinters is science. Different nations have different languages, they may have different religions, they may have different dietaries, may have different holidays, different ways of thinking, but there's only one science. In other words, the laws of nature that are discovered by an Englishman or by a German or by an American work in Nigeria and Indonesia and everywhere else. And when the Chinese or Japanese join in modern science, they do what we do. They do science as we do. There's only...
Exactly. I have people all over the world, everywhere. I mean, literally every country in the world, almost. And the Russians now are big into mud fossils. And I find all over the world they have stories that were indigenous. They were stories that were part of their culture that pointed to giants, that pointed to battles, that pointed to this and that. And there, I have been investigating most of those that I can that have any detailed accounts. And a lot of them have some very extremely detailed accounts. And the most detailed of anything is Apollodorus. And he was, Apollodorus wrote all of the early texts, basically from Hesiod. Hesiod, they have a couple of different words. I call him Hesiod, Hesiod, Hesiod. And he was told what to write by the daughters of Zeus, who was God at that time. And he apparently was the god that we would call Satan, because he was the sexual god. And he came and he had sex with all the women down here. And then they, of course, had giants and Hercules and all these things, half gods, half giants, all kinds of crazy stuff. But if you read Apollodorus, your lights will fizzle. I'm going to tell you that right now. Listen to this. So he's saying there's only one science, there's only one truth, and he's correct. But if you don't use that science to either validate or invalidate theories and opinions, then you are not a scientist. So you have to use the science that you can see, the physical, to support or not support the things that people are claiming. You have to use the science. It's just like this flat earth systems thing. They're going, oh, earth is flat. No, it's not. 1,000 years, 2,000 years ago, I could see, yeah, you'd probably think, no question whatsoever, the earth is flat. I mean, I would if I didn't know that there was a space station looking down on it. But when I hear people say, oh, there's no space station, nobody's ever been off the face of the planet, there's no rockets, there's no star, everything, I mean, it just goes on insanity. Those are the kind of people that look for the person that says 2 + 2 is 5. And they'll always say, oh yeah, no question whatsoever. And anybody that doesn't agree with that, they will destroy them, as they did. The people that were the flat earthers attacked me worse than anybody, because I wouldn't say the earth was flat, and I'm never going to say it. And don't bring it up here, because I don't like that. All it does is make this channel look silly.
Only one science. It's the only thing that encompasses all of man.
That's why there are nuclear weapons in so many different countries, because there is that unity, correct?
Well, when the nuclear weapons were invented, there were a group of scientists led by James Frank who formed a group that asked President Truman not to use it, or to use it in an unoccupied area to show it exists, but not to use it on a city. They were outvoted by, admittedly, some other scientists, but also just about unanimously by the military and political leaders of the nation. Now, afterwards, a number of scientists felt extremely guilty about it. Some left nuclear physics and got to work in other fields where they could bear to be with themselves. I never heard of a politician or a military man ever worrying about it in the slightest. So while scientists aren't perfect by any means, I really and seriously believe they are closer to reality and rationality than others are.
And it seems to me that that's a perfect place for us to end our program, and for me.
I'll tell you, that was a very good interview. And Asimov, I'm starting to wonder exactly what his opinion on God is. So, this is the beginning of an investigation. Okay, this should be fabulous. David Letterman, for those aged people such as myself, he was a great guy, fabulous interview, or funny, but, you know, substantive. Now, he's going to have Asimov come on his show here, and he starts out by saying he wrote 221 books. Look at the size of that book. and I mean, he was, well, obviously he was a prolific writer. Now, I do videos, which is similar to books, only I have 3,000 plus videos. Now, you know, there's so much to talk about. Books, that's a big project to do that. I wrote 45 papers. I have them up on academia.edu, and I have a book, and I have some other books that I never finished. I get so frustrated after a while, I just stop writing. So at some point, if I don't die, I will finish up on some of these other projects. But I like doing the videos. Easy. It's kind of fun for me. I learned so much from watching this. Now, Asimov is going to come on here. Now, listen to what he has to say. It runs 13 minutes. So I know this video I'm doing has been quite long. But if you want to learn, you take your time and learn. You come back to it. You don't have to do the whole thing at once. Here goes.
Next guest's most recent published work is his 221st book. I haven't written that many postcards. The book is entitled Enjoy Still Felt, an autobiography. Welcome, please, Dr. Isaac Asimov.
You ever hear of a postcard?
Let's spend a minute here talking about the fact that you've written 221 books.
So far.
So far. Is that a compulsive behavior, do you think?
I enjoy it. You know, why not?
Sure.
But I say to myself, here I am, a handsome writer. Why shouldn't I write?
Yeah.
I like this guy.
What kind of schedule do you put in to write that many books?
I get up in the morning, sit down and write. When I finish writing, go back to bed.
Is there one particular work that's a favorite for you out of all of those publications?
Well, yes. The one you've got right there is the second volume of my autobiography. That and the first volume, if you put them together, is my favorite book because it's my favorite subject.
Tell me a little bit.
All right, I'm going to just leave it at this because he goes into all kinds of other areas, and he's just like me. He's talking about insulin and other things, and the genes and the pancreas and all kinds of stuff. And you know, he's into every range of science, and to be able to understand all these ranges of scientific, you know, understanding, he can write books and with a broad discussion of the things within the books. Like he said, he annotated a number of books in Genesis. And he said it would take like 15 pages, and by the time he was done annotating, saying, well, here's what I think this means, let's talk about it in this way, and maybe they were somewhere in the desert doing whatever he does to annotate it, it ended up being 200 and something pages. So he's breaking things down. That's what I do too. I do exactly the same thing. I don't want to see just the top layer and bounce it off and just go away. I want to see, how did that get to that layer? What does the layer below come from? You know, of everything, of understanding, of material substances. And I'm a material guy, so I want to see the actual evidence. I want to see the bits and pieces, the body parts. And how did they get to become stone? And how do the ancient texts tie in with all these things that I've discovered that are literally true? That were described in these ancient texts. What does it mean? What does it mean for eternity? That's where I'm going. So I'm going to leave it today for that. Thank you. I love you all. And we're going to look at Aldous Huxley too. He was another one of my heroes. He wrote 1984 and Brave New World. And I think many other things too. Most of these guys that are really looking for something, you don't stop. It's like me. I'm looking for something. I'm not going to stop. It's just like him. He never stopped. It's like Velikovsky. He never stopped either. None of them do. Because once you realize that the things that you thought were true are not true, and then you can continue to spread that out across the board, you realize virtually everything on that board wasn't true. Then, and I know these guys must have felt some of that. And the ones that really felt it strongly, like I did, and tried to make their way in the academic realm, they were destroyed and they were pushed out. So that never came to the surface. And the only way you could do it was to write about it as science fiction, or like me, as reality and fact. But I don't care about being in their realm of academia and getting Nobel Prizes for this or that and awards. None of that stuff is... I couldn't speak about that if I wanted to be taken seriously. I couldn't speak about the things I speak about, so nobody ever speaks about it. I know people must have known about this. It's impossible to miss this stuff. Absolutely, totally impossible. But as soon as you start saying anything, you get destroyed so fast, and everybody comes after you. It's not just one guy or two guys, it's everybody. Even people in your family, everybody. They go against you because you're so out of the box that you're considered insane. And that's basically the last 15 years of my life. So I'm just going to continue to do what I'm doing. And now the evidence is rock solid. So the next DNA tests are coming up. I got my little mask and my cleaning agents, my alcohol. I got my drill press ready to go, and I'm going to be taking samples out of both of these. And I'll show them when I do it how I get the sample out of there. I'm going to drill holes in both of them, find a goody bloody spot, and then we'll swab it out of there and send it off to be tested. And I will be using gloves and, you know, the whole. I got all the stuff. I'm going to do it right, and that's what we'll get. And when I do this, I'll have clean stuff that'll be coming out of the box. I just wanted to show you what I'm going to use. So. And, you know, these are the ones that I'm going to be testing. Some of them have already been DNA tested. Now, and I'm also DNA testing myself, so that if my profile is the same as the one that comes out of some of these, well, no, I contaminated it. But if it comes out negative, well, I didn't contaminate it. Whatever's in there is in there. Wherever it came from, I say it came out of the rocks. And I know I can see the blood in them. I go right into the arteries. Anyway, stay with me. If you want reality, you know, it's a journey, and it's not comfortable in a lot of times. But reality is a reality, and sometimes reality can be a really hard place to be in. That's why people are perfectly happy, deluded. You know, ignorance is bliss. Even intelligence can be ignorance, and it's still bliss. And then you become perfectly happy, deluded. So, do you want reality, or do you want to be perfectly happy deluded? That's up to you. If you think there's an eternity, I would go for reality. I think there's an eternity, and that's where I am investing my considerations, is what might that look like? What do I have to do to get to the right side of it? Everything I've ever heard and every story that is in the ancient text is now appearing to have some rooted truth to it, and every single one of them had a heaven and a hell. So you take your own position on that, and that's fine. That's because that's what they wrote in the ancient texts. Some will hear and they'll never hear. Some will see and they'll never see. There'll be false teachers among you, and their destruction does not sleep. It's exactly what it says. And they talk about the teachers. Oh, very, very bad. And they talk about the ancient Pharisee, which was the teachers then. Those were really the teachers. They were the scholarly section of society, primarily regarding religion, because that was a big part of society back then. They understood there was a lot more to this than just some fringe idiots talking about some guy that could walk on water and all this crazy stuff. Back then, they knew it was rooted in truth. But even by the time of Christ, they had gone away from dragons and giants and all that. They thought all that stuff was silly. By that time, but just before that, 800 years earlier, there was gods here talking to Hesiod. The daughters of Zeus told him what to write about the ancient texts. This goes so deep, it's just beyond belief. And if you know, life does not last forever. So don't think that. Well, I don't care what you think, but I'm going to tell you. You show me somebody other than Jesus Christ that came back from the dead, I'd like to see it. And I would like to see Jesus Christ myself. But I do believe that he did come back from the dead, because all of the things that he talked about in these non-commodity texts, which were buried long ago, they say, oh, those are Gnostic, you can't believe those. Well, let me tell you something. Those were said to be the secret sayings of Jesus, buried in the desert, because they know they would destroy him if they found him. So they buried him. They are unaltered since Jesus was walking on the face of the planet, and they've been buried since 1945. They discovered them, and they are very complete. And they have, like the Gospel of Thomas, is 114 sayings from Jesus that are very, very, very difficult, and some of them are very, very, very disturbing. And he actually says that. He says, when you learn, you will be disturbed, and you will marvel. That's what he says. And he also says, the world is a corpse. And he also says, when you discover the world, well, he says, when whoever discovers the world will find a corpse. He says, whoever discovers the world will find the body. And he also says, if they ask you where you came from, tell them you came from the light, from the place where the light comes on its own accord. The only place I know of is the sun. That's where the light comes of its own accord. And he says that's where we come from. We are the children of the light. So, is the sun God? I don't know. People are going to take a lot of offense at this, because people have, right now, nobody has done the work. All they do is say, read this book. Only read this one book. Don't read any other book, because they're going to get confused. And that's what they're going to say about me. That's, oh, you're trying to confuse people. I'm not trying to confuse anybody. I'm trying to look into what was written and what is on the ground that I can present evidence to support. All right, so I'm going to leave it at that for now. But thank you, and hopefully we can get to the end of this somehow and understand something about our past. And if it helps you, it helps you. If it doesn't, well, that's just the way it works. And that's what it says in the ancient text. It says some will see these things and others won't. And there's another one that was really kind of interesting. It says that he would send somebody that was despised and hated and all that stuff, basically like me, to overturn the strong. He would send the weak to overturn the strong, or something like that. All kinds of passages about this, because they have taken over society. Basically, I'm sorry, I keep going down that road, but if you don't understand these ancient stories have substance, you're never going to understand truth or reality or eternity. And for me right now, eternity is where I'm trying to understand.